more. Please explain a lot more about the Markabians and the Between Lives area and the implant stations. I believe one is meant to be on the moon, and there are others on Venus, which is impossible, of course, because the average temperature on Venus in the winter is something like 450 degrees Celsius. Venus also has an atmosphere much heavier than Earth's, and it would be impossible for a person to be on the surface because of the air pressure. We have mapped all of Venus and the moon. Where are the implant stations? Okay, Gary, well, silly and fun question, but I mean, seriously, L. Ron Hubbard just made stuff up, but just off the top of his head, all the time in his lectures, especially on the subject of space opera. He was, after all, a science fiction writer and fantasy writer, and he did have quite an active imagination. So there are no implant stations on Venus or Mars or the moon. And Mars also, by the way, is another place where there are supposed to be these stations. So I cannot easily explain in just a few minutes the entire cosmology of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard's vision of all the things that are going on in the big wide universe out there. It's a long story. It is contradictory in some places, very, very incomplete, lots of holes in other places. He just drops hints here and there and everywhere about all of this without totally fully explaining what he's talking about. So you get bits and pieces, and from these bits and pieces, you're supposed to put together a sort of puzzle picture of the whole thing. And it changed over the years, right, as he did research. So basically what we're talking about, though, in broad strokes here, is that there are civilizations, Hubbard claims, out in the universe. And there is a Galactic Confederation out there. There is a Markabian Confederacy out there, or at least there was before I think it was blown away or destroyed by Xenu as part of the OT3 Xenu narrative. I believe, from what I've read and understand about all this, the Markabians are the culture or society that Xenu was in charge of. And when he committed mass genocide and blew everybody up here on Earth, otherwise known as Tigiak, he was wiping out all these Markabians. The Markabians were but one of many civilizations out there. There have been invader forces. Hubbard numbered them. I think there were 4 or 5 or 6 of them that came through this solar system over the last many millions of years and set up these implant stations. And they were warring between these cultures. So the first invader force comes through here, and it sets up some implant stations on Earth in the Pyrenees Mountains, let's say. That's the place where there were supposed to be some. And so when people die, they get sucked into these implant stations spiritually now through the use of electronics that are supposedly so advanced that we haven't developed them here on Earth yet, but they can somehow control or sort of tractor beam a spiritual entity. Now, how that's supposed to work is anybody's guess. Hubbard never really totally fully explains it, except to say that Thetans, spiritual entities, somehow are subject to the laws of the physical universe, even though they are not part of the physical universe. And this is one of the key contradictions in Scientology that just doesn't make any sense at all, is how it is that a spiritual entity that has no mass, no weight, no wavelength, no location in space or time, yet somehow has an awareness of being inside the physical universe and running a body, and somehow that spiritual entity is subject to these electronics that can control it and hurt it. And so, and it has to be that way, otherwise all this cosmology falls apart. So you die, you go to an implant station, you get implanted, you get run through this mill of then there's thousands and thousands of different implants, but the basic idea is to make you forget your last lifetime and get you ready to go get another body, and don't do anything else. You don't get to fly off and go make your own planet or be aware that you're a spiritual entity that's outside of this whole game of bodies and everything. You're supposed to forget all that. See, and the implant stations are supposed to make you do it. So they set up these implant stations, and one civilization, one invader force might have set them up on the Pyrenees Mountains. And then another one came along and said, oh, there's Legion X's implant stations, and they're running this society, and they're controlling these people here. But we want to control these people. So we're going to set up an alternative implant station, and we're going to do it on Mars or Venus. And we're going to bury these things in such a way that the people on this planet with their primitive technology will not be able to detect them, right? Because they're going to be shielded by electronics again that are too advanced for our current state of technology. But somehow Hubbard knows about all of this, and he, and he regaled his followers with stories about this stuff. So this is one of the key ways that intergalactic civilizations out there control populations, is through these implants, the between lives implants. You have a body, you grow the body, you run the body dies, and you go off and get implanted, and then you come back. And you've done this millions and millions of times, to the point where really all they have to do is sort of say implant, and you go, oh yeah, and off you go and get another body and continue living, life after life after life. That's basically the structure of it. And Hubbard said not a whole lot more about these various invader forces. He said that they influence civilizations. He talked about the fact that the Egyptian civilization was very heavily influenced by invader forces. He said that they had laser pistols, and there were whole battles going on here on Earth between these invader forces out of sight of us. It was kind of a Men in Black kind of situation. The movies, Men in Black, kind of like that. Aliens come down to Earth all the time. They hide. They do this. They do that. And we don't have the technology to deal with them. And if we did, we'd probably just make human beings forget about them rather than actually, real Men in Black kind of stuff, So that's kind of the picture of how things are in some ways, according to Hubbard. And of course, anything goes. So he could, I didn't hear every single word L. Ron Hubbard ever said. So there's lots and lots of lectures he gave where he probably talked more about this stuff beyond what I know. I read a lot of stuff. I listened to a lot of lectures, but there might be more information than what I'm saying right now. But pretty much, this is how I understand things to be with this stuff. And I hope that gives you a little bit of a picture. Like I said, it's a deep subject. You have to go through a lot of Hubbard materials in order to even get as much as what I've told you here. But that's how it goes. And that's what I can say about it.